إنه لا ييأس من روح الله إلا القوم الكافرون. The only people who lose, the fact is, nobody loses hope in Allah's mercy except, or nobody has hope in Allah's mercy except disbelieving people. What does that mean? Well, it means, first of all, most interpretations are, well, if you don't have hope in Allah, you'll be like who? Disbelievers. But actually, the contrast is more, even more valid. What's the contrast? The contrast is disbelievers, people who don't have Allah in their life, have no hope of Allah giving them relief because they never ask Allah for it. Why would they get relief from Allah Azza wa Jal? But you and I, we're not like them. We're believers. We have Allah in our lives. We have the source of all hope and all relief. The one who gives relief to my lungs every time I inhale and every time I exhale. He's not going to give relief when I ask him. I should expect that he won't do that. We take what Allah does for us on a daily basis for granted. The world is now shaken by a virus. How many millions of bacteria, trillions of bacteria are floating inside our bodies? How many unknown viruses are right now in this room? How many unseen killers are around me that Allah has sent legions of angels to protect me from miraculously? And I have no knowledge of, how this is functioning. If I was in charge of the maintenance of my lungs or the cleaning up of my arteries, if I was in charge of that, then I'd be dead a long time ago. He's the one making the heart beat. He's making the eyes wet so they can continue to see. He's making the earlobes function. He's making every neuron fire in this brain. Otherwise, this is a dead piece of organic matter. That's all this is. But there's a miracle happening in the fact that we're alive right now. That's the believer's view of Allah Azza wa Jal. I used to say a long time ago in my lectures, I believe it was Tariq Soidan who said it in one of his lectures. I heard it and I was like, whoa, that's a pretty epic example. He said, I want you to imagine a person from the time they were born until they were like 20 years old. They lived in a house with no windows. They could never leave that house. They can't see outside, ever. And 20 years later, they're let out in the middle of the day. And they look at the sun. What's their reaction? You guys see that? Oh my God, it's huge. It's lighting up everything. And everybody's like, are you crazy? The sun? You know why it's so normal to us? Why the sun is so normal? Because we see it every day. We take it for granted because we see it every day. The sky, the breeze, the clouds. We see these things every day, so they're just nothing. Are they nothing? Just contemplate what they are and how Allah has produced life on this earth. How can someone contemplate what Allah has done for us and then not have hope in the relief that Allah will bring? The only people who will do that, the only people who never even consider having hope in Allah are people who don't know Allah. But you my sons, you know Allah. You know Him. You can't have that. And Allah will not give relief to those who never turn to Him. Not in the way that He will give a believer. So, and you're believers, you're fortunate. You have Allah. What's He doing? Remarkably, they used Allah's name in vain, not a couple of ayat ago. When they yelled at Him about Him mentioning Yusuf, they mentioned Allah's name in the beginning. Swear to Allah. You're going to keep talking about Yusuf? That was inappropriate use of Allah's name, wasn't it? But He's saying, even if your iman is this little weak, even if you have your tongues can mention Allah's name, but your hearts don't shake when you say His name. Somewhere in that heart that doesn't shake, there is still one cell in there that has iman in it. And that one cell will find mercy with Allah. Find hope in Allah. I know there's iman in you. It doesn't matter how cold you get. It doesn't matter how hard your hearts get. There's iman in you. And that iman should make you hopeful. But the question then arises, hopeful of what? You should say to Yusuf, you should be hopeful when you're in jail. You should say to Binyamin, you should be hopeful because you found your brother. Hopeful is for people who are in despair. They're not the ones in despair. They're perfectly fine. Actually, they're not all broken up about losing Binyamin, nor about losing Yusuf, are they? Not that much. So what do they need to hear about the mercy of Allah or not losing hope in the mercy of Allah? This is the deep insight, from what I can tell, of Yaqub alayhi salam into his sons. He's telling them, you don't confront your sin and you don't confront what you've done with Yusuf because you think that if you do, you will come to a terrible conclusion about yourself, that you are monsters, that you're killers, that you're ruthless, that you're bloodthirsty, that you're evil, that you did something the devil would do. So you're horrible people. And he tells them, even though you just yelled at me and you're angry, that tells me you have guilt inside you. And that guilt means there's a goodness inside you that's still alive. Don't lose hope in Allah's mercy. Allah can restore you. He can redeem you. You messed up, sure. Go look for him. Go look for Yusuf, and maybe that's a way you can redeem your soul. Don't lose hope in Allah's mercy, meaning if you do that, as you do that, you need to know that by you doing that, maybe Allah will, bring you back in his graces, and you don't have to think that Allah has cast me off anyway. I'm a bad person anyway, right? So what do I do? What do I care? I don't want to think about it anymore. There's an interesting bit of psychology when somebody is constantly guilted, right? Then they eventually shut off guilt. Because nobody wants to, because when you're made to feel guilty, you feel bad. Nobody wants to feel bad over and over and over again, right? So they get rid of the thing that makes them feel bad. Like if they were in a relationship where the father made them feel guilty for being a dropout of school all the time. This kid runs away from home because he doesn't want to feel shamed and guilted over and over and over again. I just couldn't take it. I ran away from home. That happens. It could be a marriage that breaks because one is constantly shaming and guilting the other. I can't take this anymore. I'm done being blamed for everything. I'm done being criticized. I'm done being belittled. I need to breathe. And people run from what? From guilt. And some people run from Allah's deen because of guilt. Some people say, well, every khutbah I went to, the khatib keeps saying, you're going to burn in hell, you're going to burn in hell, you're going to burn in hell. Okay, fine, I'm going to burn in hell. God, this is a negative religion. I just need to be positive. So I'm going to be around some friends who just want to smoke some weed and think happy thoughts and good vibes. So, I just want to be happy. So I just want to get away from this whole thing because it's too negative, man. It's just way too negative. I don't want to be around that kind of negativity. There's too much guilting and shame. Now I live without guilt. I feel good about what I do. You want to run away from guilt. If guilt is caused by human beings, it's a bad thing. When Allah makes you guilty about something, it's because you should be guilty about it. And our religion isn't about beating people over the head with guilt. It's not. The Prophet ﷺ didn't used to shame people, even sinners. Even Yaqub ﷺ is not shaming his sons over what they did. He's just saying, go look for him. But you know what? Sometimes people's guilt is so heavy inside of them that even if you're not beating it over their head and shaming them, they're shaming themselves so much inside themselves that they run from confronting Allah. They lose hope in Allah. They don't want to deal with Allah. And that's not something Allah did to them. That's not something somebody else did to them. That's something shaitan does to them inside of themselves, that they just lose hope because they don't want to deal with the guilt. You see? So now here, when he says to them, don't lose hope in the relief coming from Allah, in the redemption coming from Allah, Rawhillah.